Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll share my screen. And alrighty. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all. I know every single one of you, so I don't think my introduction has to be that long. Welcome to an overview of embedded tutoring now. As you probably know, my name is Theresa Hoffman. I am the embedded tutoring coordinator. And I started in this position last January as the interim embedded tutor coordinator. And I also worked in the math department as a VAP at the time. And now I am full-time ETC, and I have been since last summer. So moving forward. So far, I've supervised 77 embedded math tutoring placements. And we're looking like we'll break 100 come this next semester. So that's a little about me. What we're going to talk about today, and I'll kind of just go in the order that I had planned, even though I think a lot of you in the group know this information anyway, but just in case anyone joins in late or wants to watch the recording. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
I'm going to talk to you guys about what embedded tutoring is in the general sense, how it's related to the Title III grant and SUNY Oswego, the design we follow here, and what we found in last fall's semester. So I'll show you some data, I'll explain it a little bit, how we assess the program, and then I'll talk about what just happened in the spring and what's coming up next year. So, what is embedded tutoring exactly? Well, embedded tutoring is the process of placing a tutor directly within a classroom. So, this tutor is different from a regular tutor because they attend the class that they are assigned to. This differs from supplemental instruction or SI because embedded tutoring in our terms is defined by a self-selected participation, meaning the students who seek out embedded tutoring are choosing to do that. So it is optional. It's not built in to the class. It's not mandatory as it would be in the SI model. And so just a little bit about how we got here, why we're doing embedded tutoring. Well, it came about in about 2021 when SUNY Oswego participated in a Student Success Equity Intensive, so SSEI. And this group identified equity gaps for underserved students at SUNY Oswego, particularly in regards to retention and graduation rates, as well as declining success in entry-level math courses in terms of their grades and their GPA, which led to low credit accumulation. So we did end up receiving a 5-year grant for just under $2 million. It's a federal grant, and this funding spans from 2023 to 2028. And even though our funding is only through those 5 years, it does decrease each year. So the idea is that project personnel and programs will be institutionalized after the grant funding has concluded. And the goal of the grant overall is to increase the capacity of Oswego to equitably engage, retain, and graduate all students. So, diving back into how this relates to embedded tutoring. Embedded tutoring is one of the facets of the grant. I feel like I skipped a slide, or maybe I went out of order. But really quickly, I'll just go back to like excuse me, what benefits would come out of embedded tutoring, why we're doing this. So by having the tutor go directly in the class, attend the class, the embedded tutors are familiarized with the course syllabus of that particular instructor, the learning outcomes that that professor has, assignment due dates, grading structures, and class policies, as well as a refresher of the course content. So a big misconception about embedded tutoring is that maybe the tutor is going to the class to relearn the material and it's only benefiting the tutor. But that's really not true. The benefits of embedded tutoring are, in my opinion, far more for the students and the professor than it is for the tutor themselves. So I think a lot of people can get caught up on the fact like, oh, well, why does the tutor need to refresh their memory? Like, shouldn't they already know it? They already got an A in the class. I totally understand that. But, they may have not taken the class in a while, so it's not the idea that they're like learning it for the first time usually. Maybe they took the class at another institution, but it does help them to refresh their memory of the little details, especially if it has been a while. So we don't have the expectation that embedded tutors are these professional expert tutors. They are peer tutors, so they are undergraduate students. And so they may just need to revisit a class. Maybe they took it their freshman year, but that little bit of brushing up would help them. But as you can see, that's just one bullet point of, why that's a benefit. But this tutor who's in this class with this particular professor, they're going to know way more about the specific expectations of that particular professor than a tutor who's not in that classroom. So not only is it helping them to relearn the content a little bit, like just refresh it, but it really does benefit the professor in the sense that you now have a tutor who knows exactly what you'd expect. And I'll get into like the tutor's responsibilities in a minute, but I just wanted to make it clear that it's a big misconception that people are like tutors are going to the class to get that extra help for the tutor themselves, but really that's not the focus. It's just to refresh their memory so that they can be more helpful in that class. Another idea would be like if the tutor took the class at a different college, I may have already said that. So learning how it is at Oswego, that may help them to be a better, more well-rounded tutor outside of the classroom. And by placing that tutor directly in the class, I just need to move the toolbar out of the way. It helps to increase visibility of the tutoring center. So OLS is our abbreviation. These services, it helps to ease students into the tutoring process. And that's really, really important in getting students to come here. It can be a very intimidating thing, asking for help. So having that tutor built into the class to be that familiar face, to be that person that that student knows, can really help them to be more aware of what support they have as a student, than having to go find it on their own. Of course, we have students who will do that, but having an embedded tutor, as I'll show you, does help more students to seek out tutoring, than they would if they were, making the decision by themselves. And embedded tutoring helps to strengthen relationships between the tutoring center and faculty. So as you may be able to tell, this is going to be all about math embedded tutoring. We are very well acquainted with the math department. Um, Myself, Amy, who's a STEM coordinator, and Casey, who's the associate director here, we were all math professors. So we have that relationship with the math department anyway, but it is so necessary to have successful embedded tutoring placements, and this does really help to strengthen our relationship. And so the reason that embedded tutoring is needed and how, again, it ties back to the grant. So the embedded tutoring program is designed to improve students' academic performance by making them aware of these supports that they have, leading to increased credit accumulation, retention, and graduation. And in combination with faculty development on inclusive pedagogies, the program also aims to eliminate equity gaps for underserved students that reemerged during the pandemic. So the idea is embedded tutoring will help provide more resources to these students so that they can seek that academic support and then help them to pass that math class and move forward into their program. So I want to take a brief moment, pause for any questions if anybody in the audience has any about the grant, how it ties into embedded tutoring before I continue talking about the actual responsibilities of the embedded tutor. Feel free to shout out if you have any questions or type it in the chat. Alrighty, so if you think of a question, you can throw it in the chat. I'll just keep going. It's a lot of information, so I wanted to give opportunities for breaks. Okay, so our specific design here, so we know that embedded tutors go to the class, so that's number one responsibility, attending that class. Anytime that class meets, that tutor is expected to go. So what do they do in this class? Well, any embedded tutoring placement can look different from one to the next. So we don't have a specific, like, you have to do this type of model here. It really is using the embedded tutor that best suits that faculty member. So the faculty member is in control of how they want to utilize their embedded tutor. So we do ask that embedded tutors take notes and assist students in that way that it best suits the faculty member, but also demonstrating that model student behavior is really important. So I recognize I just said that we don't have a you have to do this type of model, but really the bare bones basics that the tutor would do is take notes and then demonstrate that model student behavior. So what I mean when I say like they don't have a certain way that they have to do it, if a professor tends to run their class as a lecture, the embedded tutor still will get all those benefits of like taking the notes for the students as well as knowing the professor's expectations. So that is still a valuable embedded tutor and a valuable placement. Whereas you could also have a professor who focuses more on like group instruction, where they do a lot of group work, or if they say like, okay, now you practice this problem or this problem set on your own, that's another way an embedded tutor could be utilized in that class time. They could walk around the room, circulate, help the students. That would be amazing. It definitely helps for the tutor to build that relationship with the students. But you know, we don't always have that. Need embedded tutors just as much as a interactive class would. So really the use of the embedded tutors up to the instructor, how they would want to utilize them. But that model student behavior is particularly important. I do hold that expectation pretty highly with the tutors that I oversee because they need to prioritize things like showing up on time. They need to show students like that they are actively engaged, not on their phone. They don't have their AirPods in. They're listening to the instructor when they're talking. So demonstrating that behavior can help students, especially in these like entry-level courses, especially if they're an incoming freshman, to see how college works and see how they can be more successful. And another part of the embedded tutoring model that I didn't mention before is that embedded tutors are students who have either taken the class themselves or they have the prerequisite knowledge. So like if somebody came in with credit from like Calc 1, they can be embedded in anything before Calc 1 as well. So you don't have to like explicitly take that course, if that makes sense. So if you have the prerequisite skills, the idea is you can be an embedded tutor for that. And that's really powerful for these students in these entry-level classes, especially I heard it most recently in statistics, Math 158. It seems like halfway through the semester, the students kind of realize like, oh my gosh, you were in this class too. Like you had this professor. That's even better because they can see a student was successful and it better helps them to be able to see like, okay, if this person did it, I can do it too. And that's a really critical piece of this, being that peer to show like, this is possible. You can be successful. We can work together. But that model student behavior is very, very important to me. Another thing that embedded tutors are asked to do is hold weekly 2-hour drop-in sessions, so no appointment is needed. So this is outside of the class time. Usually it's in the evenings because that's when classes are over and where we have most of our tutoring take place. You may have heard rumblings about our drop-ins being up in the Shinneman building at night so we could have more space. That is true. And so each week, a tutor is responsible for a 2-hour drop-in session where the tutor doesn't have to prepare anything. The students don't have to prepare anything. They can just show up to the session and ask questions. It could be a time where maybe like the students schedule doesn't work well with the professor's office hours and they just had a really quick question they wanted to ask. They could go to the drop-in and say like, hey, could you catch me up on the notes I missed yesterday? That's why note taking is really important. The idea is the tutor's supposed to be able to catch up the student, thus helping the professor as well. And so in these drop-ins, they could ask for help on the notes that they went over. They can go over past quizzes and tests, assuming they're not being resubmitted for a new grade. They can really just ask any questions that they want, assuming that it follows our policies for academic integrity. So we don't work on graded work in the tutoring center, but they could help with other things. They could provide alternate examples to work on, things like that. So the really important thing is the student doesn't need an appointment to show up with their tutor. Their tutor will be there waiting. And it's great when there's a group of students because then the tutor could help facilitate that group work, navigate around the room like they might in class, that sort of thing. And another thing to to point out is in this drop-in, it is not restricted to the embedded section. So just because, this is Professor Hoffman's drop-in, like with that embedded tutor, anybody taking that course is able to go. So like if someone were holding a Math 101 drop-in, anybody enrolled in Math 101, regardless of if they're in the embedded section or not, can attend it. Another thing that embedded tutors are responsible for each week is being available for at least 6 one-on-one appointment slots during the week so that students could sign up for a one-on-one session. So we are by appointment for our tutoring services here. So they have to book it using our online system, TrackCloud, to make that appointment with the tutor so the tutor knows to show up. And these embedded tutors have to be available for at least 6 one-on-one sessions to be available for the students in their class. They also provide review sessions as needed. So that's really the one thing embedded tutors kind of have to do on their own time, if you will, preparing for periodic review sessions. So normally it's around every exam in the math class. There's usually 2 to 4. So that's about how many we expect embedded tutors to have each semester. And so the tutor will provide review materials, or they could use materials provided by the instructor. That's definitely preferred, but not required. And the session would last 2 hours, and the embedded tutor is expected to collaborate or at least notify the faculty member during the planning process, like, hey, this is what I'm planning on going over. What's your feedback? That sort of thing. The embedded tutor is asked to advertise their sessions so that students know to come to it. And the embedded tutor is also responsible for like passing the attendance sheet around so that we know who came to tutoring for the data that I'll show you later. Continuing on, some responsibilities of embedded tutors are attending biweekly coordinator meetings. That is with me for the embedded math tutors. And our meetings are based on the College of Reading and Learning Association's requirements. So that is a professional organization that we use to certify our tutors. And we base our trainings off of their suggested topics. And so they meet with me every other week for about an hour to talk about various training things like working with faculty and staff. So they're getting training that builds upon their training from their level 1 certification, which comes through GST 308, which is our peer tutor training course that tutors take during their first semester of tutoring here. So that would happen during their first semester. The trainings I'm talking about right now happen with me when they're an embedded tutor later on. On the weeks that students don't meet with me, or the weeks that tutors don't meet with me, they meet with their faculty member, again, on a biweekly basis. And this is just set aside time to discuss upcoming lessons, misconceptions, tutoring updates, or general concerns. So a lot of times these meetings, they don't necessarily have a chock full agenda, but it is nice having that set aside time for the tutor and the professor to talk should they need to, like if any concerns came up, or even if they just wanted to talk about like how the test went. Our tutors are FERPA trained in their first training when they're a brand new tutor, so that they know to keep these conversations confidential, not share anything they shouldn't. But they can talk to the professor, and these are the times where the embedded tutors can really see like the behind the scenes of what it's like for a faculty member. They can grow this relationship beyond just being the student in the class, which is really nice. And finally, the embedded tutor is added to Brightspace during the first week of class so that they have access to the syllabus, assignments, notes, references, or announcements, or things like that. So lots of weekly responsibilities. As you can tell, it is a position that requires a certain type of student. So we tend to look for like kind of like I talked about earlier, those model students who went through the class the first time, did well, so that they can help set up these incoming students for success. It's important to note that embedded tutor responsibilities do not include grading assignments, entering grades, proctoring by themselves, or teaching classes. So that's a pretty big difference between an embedded tutor and a TA. So they are not responsible for grading because, believe it or not, a lot of the time we see embedded tutors, they have classes with people in their embedded section. So like they might be, let's say somebody's a Calc 2 embedded tutor, they might have a class with another embedded tutor or something like that. So it's kind of why we stay away from grading responsibilities or anything like that. But it is also not a responsibility of the embedded tutor to report individual concerns or errors to the faculty member. And so by that, I mean the embedded tutor isn't necessarily going to talk to the professor about like, oh, like Theresa really struggled with this problem at drop-ins. So it's not intended to be something where the tutor would, single out an individual student. Their responsibility is to talk about the overall errors and misconceptions that students might be having in the class. So like it would be appropriate for the tutor to say, hey, I had a lot of students come into drop-ins asking about derivatives, for example. So they can be that ear to the faculty member, like, these are what students are coming in to talk to me about. And then the faculty member can then decide, oh, maybe it's something I need to revisit in class. So I told you about the embedded tutor responsibilities. So now we can talk about the faculty responsibilities. And we try to keep it very light for the faculty member because as you know, faculty members are asked to do a lot of things. So it's my intention to not add something to a faculty member's plate to make their life harder. This is supposed to help them. So firstly, introducing their embedded tutor to the class and explaining why they're there, how to use their services. That's usually just in the first week. Communicating their expectations to the embedded tutor about their role. So this is something they often talk about in their first bi-weekly meeting together, saying, hey, I really just want you to, be more of a note taker. That's an example of something they might say. Or they might say, hey, please get up and circulate the room when I'm doing that. That's something they would talk about during this meeting. So clear expectations is always helpful, just so that the tutor knows what they're supposed to be doing. They're not overstepping. They're not doing anything that the faculty member would prefer they not. So that's why those meetings are also really important. It gives them a chance to reflect on how things are going. The faculty members asked to add the embedded tutor to their Brightspace course. They're asked to meet with their embedded tutor bi-weekly, and they're asked to contact me or OLS in general for any concerns with their embedded tutor. So the big point is they're not responsible for managing their embedded tutor. They're not responsible for like talking to them about behavior concerns beyond, what's happening inside the classroom. That's really for me to supervise them. Like the tutors would tell me their attendance, things like that. So it's not intended to be a burden for the professor, like, oh, great, now I have to take on another thing and mentor another person. It's not really like that. So it's supposed to just be as low maintenance as possible for the professor while still helping them. Yeah, so as I started to say, faculty members are not required, or part of their responsibility is not to grade the tutor, supervise the tutor, or discipline the tutor in any way. So that's up to me. So then I have some characteristics of an ideal embedded course. So if it's a major gateway course leading to other math courses or courses in general, high due rate classes, so where students are getting D's, E's, or withdrawals, multiple sections being offered so that the embedded tutor can reach more students, maybe with that same course, same professor, that sort of thing. Having an average or a smaller class size, so something like a huge lecture with like hundreds of students, probably not ideal for an embedded tutor because there'd only be one of them. So having that smaller class size is helpful to help foster that relationship between the tutor and the student or tutee to come get tutoring services. In-person instruction, we have not had embedded tutors in online instruction at the moment. We're sticking to in-person for now, at least. And it's great to have, so this is an ideal embedded placement would be a student engaging or practice-based instruction. So it would be ideal to have an embedded course where there's maybe a lot of group work where the student can circulate the room, as I was mentioning before, but definitely not required. So these are just the ideal characteristics, as I said before. So I'd like to pause again for questions. Are there any questions about what the embedded tutor's responsibility is, the faculty member's responsibility, anything like that?
Yes, Theresa, I have a question for you.
Yes.
In reference to when an embedded tutor is in the classroom, are they given the book or the access code then for like the actual books? That who pays for that?
Okay, so this is something we still talk about, but at the moment, to avoid the embedded tutor, like paying for anything themselves, we have been advising the embedded tutors to just pull up the book with the students during the tutoring sessions. So they would be using the student's book on the student's laptop rather than having it themselves. We've had a little bit of trouble figuring out inclusive access in a way that's not getting billed to the tutor. So we've been trying to figure this out for a couple of semesters, and that's the solution we're at right now, is using the students in the classes textbook.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. So we're still working on that though, to get the tutors their own online access code. Any other questions? All right, lovely. Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk to you about was the results that we've had so far, particularly in the fall of 2024. And we have the data for fall of 2024 because our Associate Director, Casey Towne, just presented on how to assess a tutoring program at a conference in Rochester for the New York Tutoring Centers recently. So we had our data approved through the IRA. And that's why we have it all together for you for today. So I will be talking a bit more about that data. So again, we're looking at the fall of 2024. So at that time, we had 21 embedded tutors, and I did just a little bit of a breakdown of what courses we were embedded in. So as you'll notice, we have most of our embedded placements in the statistics courses, 158, 179, and 258. And we also have a higher presence in Gen Ed Math 102. And that is because there are more sections of that available. And you'll hear me talk in a little bit. We did have significantly more tutors than in this semester during the spring 25 semester. So here in the fall, we had 21 embedded tutors. In the spring, we had 36, but I'll talk about the spring at the very end. But so we were able to spread out a little bit more, but here you'll see a big presence in stats, gen ed, and even calculus. So we're always hoping to expand and get as many tutors in more classes as possible, but this is what the fall looked like. And so when we wanted to test the efficacy of the embedded tutoring program, we decided to compare an embedded versus a non-embedded cohort. And I'll explain this for a little bit. So with the embedded and the non-embedded cohort, we only looked at students who chose to go to tutoring. And so tutoring is defined as coming to one-on-one appointments, to drop-ins, or review sessions. And the reason we only looked at students who attended tutoring is because tutoring is considered to be a treatment in this case. So in other words, we wanted to assess the efficacy of the tutor being in the class coupled with that out-of-class tutoring. So in other words, we wanted to compare tutors who are in the class to tutors who are not in the class to see if there was any difference in the tutoring outcomes. So it's really important to look at just the people who are coming to tutoring, because ultimately, like, that's what we're responsible for, is the tutoring aspect of it. So that's why we're only looking at people who come to tutoring to see if that's helping. So the people who already want help, we're seeing if embedded tutoring offers anything different than our regular peer tutoring model. Um, and then what do I mean by embedded cohort and a non-embedded cohort? Okay. So beginning at the top of my graphic here, so we started by looking at math courses with an embedded tutor in at least one section. So going back to my graphic here, this is what I'm talking about. The math 101, 102, 104, etc. So we only looked at math courses where there was an embedded tutor somewhere. It didn't have to be in every section. It was in at least one. So for example, if you notice the math courses I listed here, so the 101, 102, and so on, you'll see Math 208 is not included in this group because there was no embedded tutor anywhere in any Math 208 sections. So we couldn't really assess them because we didn't have that embedded presence, okay? So once we looked at just the courses with an embedded tutor, we broke it up into the embedded cohort and the non-embedded cohort. So the embedded cohort had sections with an embedded tutor, whereas the non-embedded cohort had sections without an embedded tutor. And so it's kind of a lot to wrap your mind around. So first, courses that had an embedded presence somewhere, and then we split it up into, okay, these are the sections with a tutor, these are the sections without. And just for extra clarity, I did an example. So like if we look at just Math 101, people in the embedded cohort, of course, on the left were the ones with the tutors. So that's my little stick figure. Section 800 and 810, those had embedded tutors, so those are in the embedded cohort. Whereas Math 101, section 820 did not have an embedded tutor. So they're considered the non-embedded cohort. And first we can look at the effects that this had on coming to tutoring even just once. Okay, so starting off, reading from left to right, we wanted to look at the proportion of the cohort that visited the tutoring centers. So the fact that they came here and they showed up for at least one thing. So in the non-embedded cohort, we had a 30% attendance, whereas in the embedded cohort, we had a 39.2% of attendance. So this was measuring our advertising effect, getting people to come to the tutoring center. So you can see there is a drastic difference in the non-embedded cohort versus the embedded cohort. So as we can see from these numbers, having the embedded tutor in the class did help students to come to the tutoring center at a higher rate. My next graphic here, we're looking at the average course grade for cohort 2Ts. And so these GPAs that you're seeing here are their math GPA. So we didn't look at other subject areas, it's just how they did in their math class. And so if we consider the non-embedded cohort, so again, these are people that did not have the embedded tutor in that class, their course grade was a 2.13. Whereas in the embedded cohort, they had a 2.56. So you can see by just having the embedded tutor in the class, and then, of course, those other responsibilities that come with that, these students who sought tutoring, and again, these are the GPAs of people who came to tutoring. So they sought our help, they saw any math tutor. It didn't necessarily, another thing I didn't mention before is that when somebody sees a tutor, it doesn't have to be their embedded tutor. So maybe that embedded tutor schedule like didn't work for the student in the class. That's fine, but they can see any math tutor that we have. So I just wanted to make that distinction. But as you can see here, the average course grade was higher for people in the embedded cohort versus the non-embedded cohort. And then my favorite of the three is the success rate for the cohort 2Ts, because that's ultimately like why we're here. The purpose of the embedded tutoring is to help these students pass the course, get that credit, and then be able to continue on in their degree. And so this is the most drastic difference you'll see. In the non-embedded cohort, they were successful at a 58.1% rate, whereas in the embedded cohort, these people passed at an 82.4%. And passing or success is defined as a C minus or above. So that's incredible because that's like what we're here to do. So we're already seeing results even in just one semester. And do keep in mind that is a small-ish sample size. So we're really hoping to see more of our drastic results happening over time throughout the course of the grant. But it is great to have promising preliminary data anyways. I didn't put a slide in here, but are there any questions about any of the graphics that I've showed you so far? So we had the cohort that visited, the course grades, as well as the success rate. I wanted to pause before I continue. Lovely. Okay, so how do we assess our program? So we look at, of course, qualitative and quantitative data. In terms of qualitative data, I conduct a variety of surveys. So surveys for embedded tutors. This is one that I have them take during our very last meeting with me, just so that they, are on the clock when they're taking it and they'll take it seriously, hopefully. So this is an in-depth survey collecting information on embedded tutors' habits, the training, their struggles with the program, their faculty member, any suggestions or feedback for me. So I really do like to use this survey as a way that I can get their input on how things went. And after the CELT talk this morning, I would like to do more frequent surveys with my students while they're in our meetings together so I can get more frequent feedback and can make changes, sooner if I need to. But also, I do give an opportunity for them to talk about their experience working with me. Like, I want to make the experience better for them. I want to support them better. I got feedback on the trainings that I provided them with, and things like that, just so we can improve the program each semester. And it is an anonymous survey because I do want them to be honest with me. And I tell them, like, you're not going to hurt my feelings if I was the worst boss ever to you. Like, I really want to know your feedback and your thoughts. I do take them really seriously and I read them thoroughly to make the program better. But I do survey my tutors, and then we also survey the embedded faculty. It is a simple survey with checkbox answers where they can comment on their particular tutor or tutors that they worked with. So we give them an opportunity to either fill out multiple surveys if they had multiple embedded tutors, which a lot of them do now, because they might have different experiences for different tutors. And I try to keep it short and sweet, but really it's an opportunity for them to say, like, this was a great person to work with, and maybe not so much to work with. This is what you could do better. This is how OLS could support us more. Again, another opportunity for feedback. We also offer visit surveys that are automatically deployed through our online system, TrackCloud. And these are surveys for the students, or 2Ts as we call them. And it's an opportunity for feedback for the tutor. And again, these are anonymous. So each time a student will meet with somebody at the tutoring center, so whether that's an appointment or whether that's a drop-in or a review session, they could leave feedback about the tutor that they saw, and they can let us know about any concerns they may have had, or if they were an amazing tutor and had a great experience, which I'll show you a few testimonials in a second. And in terms of quantitative data, again, it's automatically collected through TrackCloud. So that's why we emphasize signing in so much. It's because we wouldn't be able to get data like the data I just showed you if we didn't have TrackCloud to collect it for all of us. So TrackCloud's incredible. We could probably talk about TrackCloud forever, but in this context, we use it to see attendance. We also have grades. We can see people's midterm grades, final grades. That's how we also recruit for future semesters. We look at people who did well on the course through TrackCloud. It's a lot easier because it's all in one place. How long they met with a tutor, what tutor they met with. And so sometimes we will send reports to faculty who ask for it if they offer extra credit for tutoring. That's the only case that we would do that, because tutoring records are protected under FERPA. So we don't just hand them out to people, but if somebody needs the record to enter a grade, say for extra credit, then we can share them with the faculty member, and it shows who the students met with, how many times. And if they wanted to do this extra credit opportunity for the amount of time the student was there. So sometimes people say, like, if you spent 5 hours tutoring, you can retake a quiz or something like that. If they're worried about the amount of time somebody is there, particularly with drop-ins, I, in the future, will tell embedded tutors to take note of the times that students were there, because with drop-ins, our sign-in policy is just like the name of the student who was there, not necessarily the amount of time. So that's something I'm correcting in the future, but that's all the data that we have at our fingertips. And so I just wanted to share a few testimonials that I got from this past semester, so in the spring of 25, from an embedded math faculty member. Overall, I'm really happy with the embedded tutoring program, and I think my students appreciate the help they receive from their tutors. That was really awesome to hear from a faculty member. And then I have a couple from embedded tutors from the surveys that I gave them. I love being an embedded tutor. It has helped me to be a better person. And being an embedded tutor has been a rewarding experience. My favorite part was being able to build connections with students and support them directly during class time. It was fulfilling to see students grow, more confident in their understanding and more comfortable asking questions. And so I've had a lot of embedded tutors talk about how embedded tutoring helped them to come out of their shell and help their confidence. I love to plug embedded tutoring, particularly to curriculum and instruction students, so pre-service teachers. I always say I wish I would have done this back when I was an undergrad, because I wanted to be a math teacher. And so it's a particularly great experience before practicums and things like that. And then also, this was an embedded Math 2T that stood out. Their review of their embedded tutor, Henry. He has helped me a few times in stats class. I've never seen him individually. However, I do go to his review sessions, and he's patient and kind and makes jokes, so it feels as though it's a lighthearted, open environment. So I'm never afraid to ask a question. I'd recommend him to another member in my class as well as a friend. And so that's ultimately what you hope for. You want them to build this relationship with the tutor so that they can recommend them to other people, but also to continue coming back to tutoring and have that academic support. So briefly, for the spring 2025, some quick facts. We had 36 embedded math tutors across 33 sections. So this semester we did have, for the first time, 2 embedded tutors in a section at once. Not at the exact same moment, but for Calc 1 this past semester, it was 5 days a week. So we had 1 embedded tutor go on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and another on Tuesday and Thursday. So that was a new change that happened this semester. We had 327 students in embedded math sections visit the tutoring center, whether that was an appointment, drop-in, or review session. And we did expand our embedded presence into more 200 level math courses. So we had more of a presence in Math 206, Math 208, and Math 215, which we're hoping to continue into next semester. And we also introduced group tutoring sessions. Something I didn't, 1 second actually, before I cut myself off. We introduced these group tutoring sessions as an opportunity for students in the class to be able to meet with their tutor more often without the tutor having to provide additional availability. So that was a big thing. It's hard to ask tutors for more and more and more time to meet with students, but this was a way around that where they could have more than one student coming to a session. This was on a per request basis, but some of our tutors did utilize it and it went really, really well. So they sometimes had 2, 3, or 4 students meeting in one session, and these students got to know each other. And so they had their own little group that came like every Friday. And it was really great for the tutors that utilized that, but it wasn't required to. And something I didn't add on here was we were hosting all of our drop-ins in Shinneman this entire semester. And that was great to expand into another building because before, if you'd ever been to the tutoring center at night, it was super, super busy, which is great, but it was pretty loud and honestly, it kind of became a concern with how many people were in one room. So we were like, oh my gosh, we have to spread this out the best we can. And so we can have a better experience, a better learning experience for 2Ts. And overall, it did seem to do that. So on that note, in our goals for this upcoming semester, we want to continue to expand into these 200 level math classes, like I said. But in terms of drop-ins, this past semester, we had a bunch of drop-ins, and that was because we had more tutors than before. Remember, I said it was a jump from 21 embedded tutors to 36. So we noticed they weren't really being utilized in the way that we had hoped. So we had far more availability, but as a result, less people were coming to the drop-ins since they were so spread out. And so we really want to focus on streamlining our drop-ins this upcoming semester, condense and consolidating our drop-ins into theme drop-ins. So an example of that would be like having a statistics night instead of having a Math 158 drop in every single day. So a statistics night would be open to Math 158, Math 179, and Math 258. And so those students could all come and meet at the same time, maybe make more connections with other people. And we also want to increase our professional staff presence at drop-ins. So that involves Casey, myself, and Amy, each going to a different night theme. So like I would go to the education night, Math 106 and 206. Amy might still go to her calculus night because she runs the calculus cafe. So we're hoping that by adding our presence up there, it'll make a difference in the use of our drop-ins and having them be utilized at their maximum potential. Another thing that we're always aiming to do is increase our efforts to target repeat appointments. So we found that tutoring is often most effective when students repeat their visits and come somewhere between 5 and 9 times. Our average for this semester, and this is off the top of my head, I believe it was like 3.8-ish visits per student who came. So we're hoping to get higher into that 5 to 9 visits. And those are our goals for this semester. So, sorry I didn't leave much time for questions, but this is my contact information if you would like it. And I did embed a link on how to request an embedded tutor for your classroom. I'm only responsible for embedded math, so that's what I speak to. But if there are any questions, we have looks like 5 more minutes. And thank you for your time today. Thank you for attending.
Teresa, that was great. You're
Oh, thank you.
back to your, can you go back to your metrics or your numbers where you talked about this one? That
Which one did you want?
one that's 82% in the embed, this
Yes.
one. Have you looked at all at like, are we seeing that the folks in the embedded tutors might be getting more A's or more like, is that anything you look at? Because
Um, Casey,
Casey's in her
I'll
head,
throw
so.
it over to you for this one, I think.
Yeah, Michelle, that was actually something I found interesting was the number of A's in the embedded cohort. It actually made me a little nervous because when I wanted to run a hypothesis test on this, the data is not normally distributed. There's a lot of A's. So the pass rate really, because the pass rate doesn't consider how high above passing it is, you're just saying, did they pass or not? So sometimes the pass rate is actually a lot higher when the GPA average is even lower, which is kind of weird to see. There's times when the GPA is a little lower, but most of the people passed. But we were
Mhm.
finding in this one, there it was very heavy on A's, which I found almost alarming because it didn't match a normal sort of, I mean, literally it wasn't normal. It was not a
Mhm.
normal
Right, right.
distribution. So I was like, I can do a hypothesis test, but it's really not fitting the assumptions.
Which is great, I think. I think it's,
It's great, but it's
yeah,
just weird. And I was
yeah,
like, I
yeah,
can't
but
actually test this way. But
sometimes the world is weird.
the most important take is that the non-embedded cohort students are meeting with tutors, but they're just not embedded tutors. So
Mhm.
we're really seeing the effect of being an embedded tutor opposed to just being a any math tutor.
Correct, yeah.
And if anyone out there is asking the question like, so what's wrong with your other tutors? Because you're like, wait, why are they not doing it? We love to point out Math 158, which is Intro Stats A, is my favorite course to describe this situation. Is that a student can get an A in that class, and depending on who they had that with, they have to learn a piece of technology. So it might have been a TI-84, it might have been Minitab, it might have been StatCrunch, it might have been Excel,
Mm.
and depending on what faculty member that tutor had, they could very easily end up tutoring a student who's doing something they never learned. I have no idea how to run Minitab, or I have never done this by hand.
Mhm.
So actually being placed in that class and seeing the technology right then, doing the things that that faculty wants you to do does make a difference in the quality of tutoring that the student is getting. And I mean, that's true for me when students come in and they're like, hey, I got to do this binomial problem by hand with all the factorials. I'm like, oh my God, I never do that. I'm like, hold on, let me get a book because I don't teach it that way. And it's the
Right.
same experience for our tutors. They're like, oh, you do this in Excel? I do it in Minitab. So there's a lot of wasted time of figuring things out, of looking things up. So it's not that the tutors aren't skillful, but there's just a lot of variety between technology and instruction techniques, and sometimes even topics that are covered. They're like,
Sure,
whoa,
sure.
we don't talk about Poisson. Why are you talking about Poisson? So embedding in that class seems to make the tutor a better tutor, and
Mhm.
we're looking for this upcoming semester to promote that idea that like your embedded tutor fits like a glove or they're made for you because sure they can come in and see any tutor that's qualified, but we are finding that that embedded tutor is their best bet and
Mhm.
they should pick them over just anyone. Like, oh, that person has a picture of a cat, I like that. Like,
Right.
no, pick your embedded tutor, they know what they're doing. So I hope
Well,
that explains, because I was like, wow, why aren't they doing it well? And I thought, well, I know why I don't tutor as well
yeah,
sometimes, and those are the reasons.
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, I do think that embedded tutoring makes a lot of sense and it really does. When I was taking Math 102 as a student, one of the students in our class was amazing. And he was like an embedded tutor. As you were explaining this, I'm like, he was an embedded tutor for us because we used to meet after school or after class with like 6 of us. And he like literally like retaught us everything. And then we got it because we weren't getting it in class. So um, so yeah, I can see why you would do better if you were
The
working with the embedded
other
tutor that
thing,
understands the coursework that your professor is teaching.
yeah, the other thing we find is that even exceptional students who do earn A's or A minuses, they usually don't really master those hardest topics in the course. So in stats, it's hypothesis testing. In college algebra, it's logs.
Mhm.
They're like, oh, in calc, it's always series and sequences.
Right.
So seeing that again, they become stronger in those topics that they just kind of eked through. So I'm
Mhm.
like, no, they can get really good grades and still not really know some of the stuff. And of course, it's the same stuff that 2Ts are going to come in for because it's hard.
Yeah,
So
right.
getting that extra training and seeing it again makes a big difference. And it also, like, we're not able to train in 18 different courses all the time. So this gives them a lot of up-to-date training. Like Math 102 just had a redesign and they had to learn all the new tax information. And then embedded tutors learned it and then went with it.
Yeah, that's what he said. Teaching it to us actually helped him learn it
Yeah.
better,
Yep.
which is
Totally.
wonderful. So it's great. So, and I think John's probably got to get us off so that he can move on to the next, right? The
Mhm.
next Zoom. So thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys for
Thank you,
coming.
Teresa.
Thank you, John.
Okay, well, thanks.
And
Good to see
you
you.
see through every one of these sessions too, don't you?
Yeah.
Holy